We shall be known by the company we keep, by the ones who circle round, attend these fasts. We shall be known by the ones who sow and reap the seeds of change that lie from deep within the earth. It is time now. It is time now that we thrive. It is time we lead ourselves into the well. It is time now, and what a time to be alive. In this great turning we shall learn to lead in love. In this great turning we shall learn to lead in love. We shall be known by the company we keep, by the ones who circle round, attend these fasts. We shall be known by the ones who sow and reap the seeds of change alive from deep within the earth. It is time now. It is time now that we thrive. It is time we lead ourselves into the well. It is time now, and what a time to be alive. In this great turning we shall learn to lead in love. In this great turning we shall learn to lead in love. We shall be known by the company we keep, by the ones who circle around, attend these fasts. We shall be known by the ones who sow and reap the seeds of change alive from deep within the earth. It is time now. It is time now that we thrive. It is time we lead ourselves into the well. It is time now, and what a time to be alive. In this great turning we shall learn to lead in love. In this great turning we shall learn to lead in love. We shall be known by the company we keep, by the ones who circle around, attend these fasts. We shall be known by the ones who sow and reap the seeds of change alive from deep within the earth. It is time now. It is time now that we thrive. It is time we lead ourselves into the well. It is time now, and what a time to be alive. In this great turning we shall learn to lead in love. In this great turning we shall learn to lead in love. In this great turning we shall learn to lead in love. In this great turning we shall learn to lead in love. Well, as New Year's is upon us, I know that the season of resolutions is nigh. I am basically always making new resolutions. I do it seasonally, I do it weekly, In some ways, I do it every day with my to-do list, which is the first thing I do every morning when I get up and sit down at my desk. I scribble out a little to-do list on a post-it note in the corner. It's barely legible, and well, I would like to say it gives me more guidance than it does, but more often than not, at the end of the day, there are some items that are uncrossed. One of the things in particular that I try and make some time for every day, but to be honest, I rarely get to, is time for writing. I'm really dedicated to being a writer. It's not that it's not important to me. It's so important to me that, well, first of all, every day, just about, I put it on the list. And every day I read other books about writing and collect quotes and prompts and other ideas for stories so that when I do write, I'll have a lot of ideas for it. It's so important to me that every day I work on other tasks and I finish other pressing commitments so that I'll eventually have a lot of time to write. It's so important to me that one of these days, certainly, I will start writing. One of my favorite authors, Anne Lamott, talks about this, about how hard it is, in fact, to just sit down every day and put your butt in the chair and write. She says, "The discouraging voices will hound you. This is all piffle," they will say. And they may be right. What you are doing may just be practice. But practice is how you're going to get better. Some of the best writing advice I ever got was from a teacher who told me, take a few moments and for now, don't write, but just write what you would write if you were going to write. I sometimes feel like in all the years since I got that advice, I haven't written a thing since then, but I have written a lot about what I would write if I did. You might call this the practice of practicing, learning how to practice. The problem is that the end product that we might imagine in our minds can just feel so far from the ugly first draft. The world as we would like it to be can feel so far from the world as it is. The person we would like ourselves to be can feel much too far from the person we see every day in the mirror. These are the demons of perfectionism, the ones that show us an imagined end product and tell us that our efforts to get there will never make it, that they are just piffle. The demons of perfectionism stand in the way of good writing, just as they stand in the way of creative risk-taking in general. And this is unfortunate because we know that creating a life for yourself that doesn't yet exist requires some creative risk-taking. And, well, in uncertain and anxious times like these, just showing up as your best self every day requires some of that creative risk-taking. It requires setting aside the discouraging voices that hound us. And perhaps most of all, imagining that world of love and justice and equity and compassion, a world so different from the violence, the inequity, the brokenness that we see around us. Just imagining that world, it means setting aside those voices that say your efforts are just piffle. When the demons of perfectionism show up like this, I try to practice the practicing of showing up for myself and others. Musicians know something about practicing. One of the requirements for all students at Berklee College of Music, where I attended years ago, is 4 semesters of ear training. Now, ear training is learning to sight sing music just by reading the notes on a page, or learning to transcribe and write down music just by listening to it. And when I began school, I certainly knew that there were people capable of this kind of magic, but it seemed like some kind of Harry Potter nonsense to me. Totally unfeasible. Like, you may as well ask me to make a feather float above my desk using my conductor's baton. I remember the first day of ear training class so well. There was a sort of nervous silence among us students. Silence, that is, except for one student who was quite vocal in his anxiety. One student in our class interrupted the teacher in the first few minutes of the very first day. He wanted to make it clear that he thought the class might be too advanced for him. He was worried, and he wanted to clarify that he knew not a single thing about ear training. The teacher kindly paused his introductions to respond, saying that we had all taken entrance exams and had been placed in the appropriate class. The teacher tried to continue, but was interrupted again. Well, the man responded, is this the very lowest class, though? Because I need to be in the very lowest class. Now, at this point, you could see our poor teacher looked around the room a little sheepishly, not really wanting to answer that, yes, we were in fact a class of the very most basic students. Well, it is Ear Training 101, he said, so it is the lowest. There is, I guess, a class for people that have previously failed the 101, but you all are just about the lowest. Now, some of the other students in the class giggled a little bit at this man's anxieties. I was kind of glad to hear, though, that someone was questioning the absurd notion that sight singing even could be taught. I don't know what happened next for that student, but he never came back to our class. Not because anything we did on that day was in fact too hard for him, I'm sure of it. But I think because he lacked a belief that improvement was even possible. I kept going, thinking that if other folks, in fact, generations of students had done this before, it must be possible somehow, even if I personally couldn't see the way forward. And I had made a commitment to at least practice the material. I've always remembered that other student, though, who gave up before he started. It's not just that he didn't try to become a master at ear training. It's that he didn't even try the practicing of it, which always struck me as the real loss. When the discouraging voices hound me, I think of him sometimes, and I remind myself that maybe for now, the work I'm doing is just practice. But practice is how I'm going to get better. This year that we are wrapping up together in the coming week, it has been a year of isolation and anxiety, a year also of uprisings calling for changes. This pandemic has revealed deep inequities in our country, and this has been a year of seeing them and calling for change, systemic change. Calling on those in power, which in some ways is all of us, to play a different role, to learn a new tune. Particularly for white people, I think this is a time to practice some new skills and learn to play some new roles in our community. A time for listening in deeper ways we haven't always done so well before, and having some hard conversations we haven't yet practiced enough. Fellow white folks, when you hear people of color making demands these days, now is a good time to practice amplifying those voices that fight to be heard elsewhere by repeating them in calls to your representatives and colleagues and family. If you've inherited wealth that was accumulated in a time of racial segregation, which is true of all wealth in this country, now is a time to practice giving it away. If your muscle memory has been to call the police when something goes wrong, now is a good time to practice something different, learning new skills for community safety. I won't all of a sudden do all of these once and for all, but I will practice the doing of them. Musicians know as well as anyone that muscle memory is very real. Consistent practicing changes the very structure of our brains, rewiring our circuitry, forging new connections and new possibilities. No one is born a musician. Musicians are just the ones that learned how to practice. Even songbirds need elder birds to sing to them and teach them the tunes.
Practice doesn't make music perfect, but it makes music possible. And so let us practice the practicing together, showing up for ourselves and others to build that new world of justice and equity and compassion. Practice won't make the world perfect, but it makes a better world possible. Someday I want to be a true expert in justice and compassion. Someday I want to be well practiced at creating that brave space, even when there is no such thing as safe space. Someday I want to be masterful at amplifying the voices that fight to be heard elsewhere. Someday I hope to be part of transforming our so-called justice system that has hurt so many so deeply. These are daunting tasks, to be sure. On most days, learning to transcribe a symphony can seem more manageable. But that's okay, because for now I don't have to do all of those things. I just need to practice doing what I would do if I were doing them. So, beloveds, don't promise to be your best self today. Just be the person you would be if you were practicing being your best self. Don't try to rebuild a new world in the image of love this week. Just practice doing what you would do if you had committed to such things. You have the right to start somewhere and continue to grow. We all have the responsibility to examine what we think we know. And so let us start together, let us grow together, and let us practice together. May it be so, and may we make it so. Our closing song is Let the Life I Lead Speak for Me. I originally learned this song as a traditional Irish folk tune, but it turns out that it was more likely created by a 70s R&B group. Either way, I invite you to sing along, and let's sing it together. Let the life I lead speak for me. Let the life I lead speak for me. When I'm lying in my grave and there's nothing more to say, let the life I lead speak for me. Let's try that verse again. Here we go. Let the life I lead speak for me. Let the life I lead speak for me. When I'm lying in my grave and there's nothing more to say, let the life I lead speak for me. Let the friends I have, let the friends I have speak for me. Let the friends I have speak for me. When I'm lying in my grave and there's nothing more to say, let the friends I have speak for me. Let the work I do, let the work I do speak for me. Let the work I do speak for me. When I'm lying in my grave and there's nothing more to say, let the work I do speak for me. Let the love I share, let the love I share speak for me. Let the love I share speak for me. When I'm lying in my grave and there's nothing
nothing more to say. Let the love I share speak for me. Let the songs I sing, let the songs I sing speak for me. Let the songs I sing speak for me. When I'm lying in my grave and there's nothing more to say, let the songs I sing speak for me. And let the life I lead speak for me. Let the life I lead speak for me. When I'm lying in my grave and there's nothing more to say, let the life I lead speak for me.
Dear ones, don't promise to be your best self today. Just be the person you would be if you were practicing being your best self. Don't try to rebuild a new world in the image of love this week. Just practice doing what you would do if you had committed to such beautiful things. You have the right to start somewhere and continue to grow, and so let us start together and grow together, and let us practice together. Go in love, go in peace, and go and be blessed as you are a blessing to others. And I invite you to join in our closing blessing, Carry the Flame.